Hello, hello, everyone. It is Kenyon here. It is Basketball Rewind here for another week of just going through hoops. At this point, if you're a Raptors fan, I'm sorry. But we did win. We did win this week. Don't have to do a recap of this week, but we did win. That's very important. Stay happy, stay locked in, folks. I know some people are looking forward to the next pizza party. Probably won't happen. Don't go hungry between now and then. So, with that being said, we have a new guest. We have some old friends, of course. The usual suspects, Beyond the Locker Room, Coach Roache, of course. Last but not least, we have a new guest, which is Tyler Rucker from the NoCeilings podcast. I'm definitely going to leave all the socials down below as per usual. Like, comment, subscribe on the way in. Always helps all the algorithm stuff. So with that being said, let's just start. This draft I have referred to as flat. Beyond has said that I'm very affectionate with that. I'm trying to be positive here, but I refer to it as flat. I think last year you could say that there was sections of the draft that were more fluid, but this year I refer to it as flat. Part of it is because there seems to be, say, players that have maybe smaller developmental pathways. For example, Dalton Connect, really good player. He's a senior, if I'm not mistaken. There's Zach Edey. He's been at this for a while. National, I think. Was it is a two-time National Player of the Year? Shout out to Canadian team. Hopefully we see him in Paris. But a couple older players have now risen up the draft boards, of course, and Klingon as well. Speaking of the matchup that is upcoming, just so people know when this is filmed. So, do you think that that's kind of fair? And we'll go around the room, but is that kind of a fair assessment? Is that being too nice, too harsh? What do you think?
I want Tyler first on this one, please.
Yeah,
it's funny because flat is that's the first time I've heard it phrased that way, and I kind of like it because it makes you think in depth. So I'm giving you a shout out on that. It's definitely, if you're looking for star power, the funny thing is, I know you guys are Raptor fans, and I've been telling people all year, if you're picking in the top 5, I would be very concerned because the consensus top 5 guys, if there isn't even such a thing right now, I think you're going to have to be really patient. They're going to be projects, which you're swinging for upside if you're picking that high usually, especially in the top 3. But I think there's depth when you get deeper into this class. I think there's specialists like Dalton Connect. I think there's upperclassmen that might not have the most upside, but can be a rotation piece, can help your team get better, take that next step. So I think smart teams are going to like having an extra first round pick or try to navigate to get some certain guys around the board. I think that's why Toronto might be thinking like, hey, we got another first. We're thinking of maybe getting a good player and then swinging for upside if they have 2 picks. It's a really interesting year. It's going to be crazy. So I think you're spot on with the flat comment. I'm not going to hate on that.
Fair enough. Beyond, Coach, would you like to chime in on this one?
You know my thoughts on this draft.
True.
Man, it's rough. I'm sorry, man. It's
rough. It is rough. You don't have to try to be polite with me. I've been trying to be polite all year.
Yeah. No. He knows where I'm going with this because I kind of tease him about
we're Canadian, but we're honest.
The flat comment always makes me chuckle because he's always being so kind. But it's like, listen, man, this draft is rough, and I see one guy right now that I can say, you know what, I can build a franchise around that guy, and that's Sar. After I see past him, everyone else, you could toss them up in the air, and wherever way they come down, is like it could be like that's one day the other. I mean, I have no clue about some of the other guys. I can't wait to get to some of the particulars of some of the guards. We'll get that discussion, but like overall, I mean, I just put it this way: if you had to take any of these guys and put in the last year's draft, where would they sit? Right, that's the way I look at it. Right, and with any of them make the top 10, I said outside of Sar, I'd be really wondering. Like, I'm not sure if any of the other ones will make the top 10. Maybe two of them, maybe 3 tops. But like in this draft, I think overall, I understand the point with the rotation part of it. I get that, and I think one of the things I've always asked coming from a Raptor perspective, when the Siakam trade happened. And
Yep.
the question I asked all my Raptor brother and sister is like, the question I asked was, what does a 2024 draft pick worth in this case here? What's the value of it? Because my thoughts was, I don't think it's valued that much. And I think based on what's come out of that, I feel vindicated a little bit, because I don't think a lot of people want to touch any more picks from this draft if they have them already. I think if you're a team like OKC, fantastic. You're just right now, you're just filling in the blanks. But everybody else, if you're trying to build and you're like a Raptors,
well, even OKC, we saw that they got off a couple picks from this year's draft.
They were even
right? We had 3 picks from this year's draft. Of course, our president of basketball operations gave his take on things, if you will, and it was very clear that they did not want to have even 3. They said, well, we planned on having 2, as in we flipped 1. We could have had 4 with a Bruce Brown, allegedly, with a Bruce Brown deal with New York, and we said, no, thank you. So it's very telling that, you hear people say there's value that you could get at 16 that you would normally get even, Dan Tolzman from the Raptors saying, there's guys that would normally go in 44 in most drafts that you could get at 13. So I find that very interesting when, the guys that are making the big bucks are saying that publicly. A little bit concerned.
And you think I've been tough on this draft class?
True. Hey, balance is nice, which we haven't had on this team. Coach.
Yeah, I think it's difficult because you go to last year's draft. You had a generational 7'4" prospect in Victor. Those guys come around once every 50 years. Last guy to come around like him, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Ralph Sampson, per se. And then you go to this year. Nobody's generational. I don't think anybody's franchise changing, quite frankly. I think there are rotation pieces in this draft, potential starters, maybe. And then you go to next year's draft. Cooper Flagg, Ace Bailey. There are going to be certainly more high-end prospects. So it's like it's like we got the dud year right now, quite frankly. And however, teams like Toronto, small market teams, a top 5 pick or a top 6 pick is still okay for development, for bringing guys in. So, like you guys have said, yes, this draft is flat, but if you're a team that's not named New York, Miami, LA, who are free agent destinations, you have to depend on the draft, develop your talent. And Toronto did it a decade ago. They did very well in drafting not only where they drafted, but who they drafted, because none of those guys, only Pirtle was a top 10 pick when they were going through their years of competitiveness. And you're going to now you just put more pressure on yourself to try to do that again. Doesn't mean you're going to do it this time around, but they don't have a choice. They have to lean into the draft for development, as do many other teams as well. OKC being another one. And they've succeeded very well in doing so. Very well. Jalen Williams and Edey and Chet, because that could have been Jabari Smith Jr. 2 years ago, but it was Chet.
Great points. And yes, I thought I personally would have taken Chet higher, but that's just me.
Smart man.
I'm still sticking with my boy, man. Sorry, man.
But listen, Jabari Smith was number 2 for me that year. Really interesting year. Really quick question: if you were to, be in the big seat in what is now known as the hot seat, if you were the Raptors GM this year, and let's just assume that they get one of the lowest odds of around 9% of staying at 6, but say you got the 6th pick, what would you do? It's obviously different if you have the number 1, but 6 shifts things, and so actually none of us have made a big board yet, which is interesting. We started to go through the prospects, but not made a big board yet. So this will be interesting to hear everyone's thoughts. Tyler, I'll let you go first, of course.
So correct me if I'm wrong. I was looking this up earlier. If they don't get it this year, next year it's still the same
It's
protection.
the same business all the way till
Ooh, that
2026.
gets very scary.
This is the fun part of
Welcome to
Yeah,
our
it's
world,
very.
Tyler. Welcome to our world.
Yeah,
the
no,
gift that keeps giving.
I looked it up this morning because I was preparing for this, and then I looked at that and I was like, "Oh, that's scary." Because as you
Can I
guys,
just add one caveat? If
yes,
it
of
doesn't
course.
convey in all the way till 2026, it becomes 2 seconds as well. So
No, which is always fun. It's tough because there's a lot of need. I mean, I'm really excited to hear who you guys are like, and if you haven't made a big board yet, because there's some names I like up there that I think could be on the board for Toronto. I like how Coach put it. I think it's these are the drafts that you don't get really pumped as a fan base because you're like, oh, there's not this superstar upside or guy that could change our franchise. There's not. There is guys that could change the direction of your team because they're going to be great supporting pieces and pieces of the puzzle. And if you keep building that depth, then when you all of a sudden find the star or Scotty takes another step and now he has all these guys around him that make life easier, or you hit on another pick down the road, that's where you start really building the foundation and start really getting close to taking that leap. And I'm a fan too. I understand it's very difficult to be patient. You want to win right away. You want to get better. But I think this draft could be the draft in which, if I'm Toronto and I somehow have 2 picks, if you don't go swinging for the fences for just like, oh, we're going to take this humongous upside raw player and hope that it hits, maybe you try to get some higher floor guys that just are smart basketball players that can kind of fit well together around. And I know that's not something that's going to get everyone so excited, but I think that's where smart teams really start putting players together. You get Grady Dick in year 2, you all of a sudden are starting to really get a good foundation. So I don't know what I would do for them at 6 right now. There's like 5 players I'd like. It's just such a wild year. And I'm not trying to just cop out of an answer. Like, if you guys want to bring up some names, I'll tell you, like, yes, absolutely. My guys before last night, I promise, my guy has continued to be Stephon Castle. I absolutely love him. I'm buying his offensive upside. I've seen him since high school drop 41 against Ron Holland with a towel hanging from his nose. Like, he's a dude. Like, I think he's a really good player and he's going to be a good talent, but the shot is going to scare people. So I understand if you're getting away from that. And I know Toronto traded for quickly. I know they're trying to figure out what they want to do too. So it's really interesting. And I would want 2 picks though, even with this class. If I was someone like Toronto, I would want to somehow keep both my picks and get a couple pieces to get this roster going.
Well, the nice thing is that you'd be in luck because you'd have up to 3.
There you go. I'm just saying this. And if you have second round picks this year, they might be more valuable than ever because it's going to be 2 days. You get to reevaluate. You can navigate the board. Like, there's depth. I think you could get good value in this second round. So
I think that Detroit second round is probably one of the more interesting picks when all is said and done, because it's like, it'll be interesting to see who moves around.
Yes.
Because there's always someone who falls. And there's also like who they pick potentially if they end up keeping, if they don't convey and they end up keeping all 3 picks. It will be very interesting. Beyond, your thoughts?
I looked at it this way. If we were to get the 6th pick, it's like, okay, which guy, assuming that next year you'd say you don't have your pick, which would be a nightmare, but let's assume that, that possibility is in play, then you better get a guy you think is going to have a lot of high upside on this pick if you're going to be the 6th pick in the draft. So I think we've kind of, danced around the kind of 2 of the guys we really like around that position, which is like, Matas, in this case, Buzelis, I like a lot. Plus, he got that dog in him that I like a lot too, because this team could use a little bit of that. We got a lot of gentlemen on this team, Tyler. A lot of gentlemen. We got one too many, man. I mean, we a few guys got the shirts out and stuff like that, man. Too many guys with the shirts tucked in. I also, and I like Holland. I do too. But the third guy, I must admit, I've grown over the last week, watching some of his video, obviously watching the tournament. The man that Tyler just mentioned, this case here, Castle's growing on me because I see a lot of a guy I love in this case here, my man out in Portland. I see a lot of that in him. I see a lot of Shady Sharp, and I'm sitting there going like, boy, let me tell you something. If and the same things with Sharp. Well, the outside jumper, great athlete stuff can get the hoop, but I can see 3-level score, morphing in that thing because my mind, the shot doesn't worry me as much. I'm like, oh, it's like, okay, more I think about it, if you could get him at 6, he's like, hey man, at least I got a guy that has a potential. It could potentially be a star, and that's what you want if you're going to be in this type of draft. Like just one of those 3 guys that can hit, because we don't have anyone that can hit right now. I mean, because to Tyler's point, we're asking for a lot, right? You're asking for a lot of jumps from a lot of people, and that's my concern with the roster, at least from a Raptors perspective. Like, how much more leaps you expect Scotty to have? Does Quickly even take a jump more than what he has now? What we see might be it for Quickly. It might just be it. And that's not a bad player, but that's not something you want to build a core around. And RJ, well, we've discussed RJ, right? Like, that's, he is maybe what he is. And that's nothing wrong with that. But, like, that's not going to get you to the next level that we're looking at. So, Castle's thrown into the mix of those 3 guys, one of those 3 guys. Whichever one's sitting there, I would take one of those 3.
Coach.
Yeah, I've been watching Castle a little bit this year and in the tournament even more. I just think his game's going to translate well to the NBA. Like Tyler said, the shot form is a little scary. He actually reminds me a little bit of former Raptor DeMar DeRozan, a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's pretty crafty around the hoop. He's got his athleticism is good. Beyond, I don't know if I can agree on that he's like Sharp. I think Sharp is just a super athlete.
No, the athleticism, I would say nothing like Sharp. I mean, that's that's like asking who could perform like Michael Jackson. I would say, right? Yes, Leonard Sharp is like like the 0.1% for athleticism. I'm just saying he's got like some athletic gifts to him that are similar in this sense. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I just think his game will translate well to the NBA. If he's on the board at 6 and the Raptors select him, I'm certainly not going to lose any sleep over it. I think there are some other guys on the board that might be more of a need, even though I know it's about drafting the best talent, as we just discussed a little bit. Maybe Castle is both, actually. Maybe he is the best talent, but also does he fit a need on this team? For NBA is very guard driven today, as compared to what it was years ago and stuff like that. So it could be that it is Castle, and that's very interesting, Tyler. I like that, how you've said that he's really grown over this tournament, for sure.
It's tough. I mean, if you have 2 potential picks in the top 20, like they could have, like you would think one of those has to be your upside swing. One of those, maybe you're thinking, okay, a smarter pick, like higher floor. And this is the year where it's like, well, how big of upside, how raw are we going to swing on a prospect? Because there's just so many questions when it comes to guys near the top of the ranks. And, Bazelis, Holland, like you guys were mentioning, like those are 2 intriguing names. Those are 2 names when you talk to people around the league, you get the craziest answers when it comes to range. Like some are like, oh, I like him up here. And some are like, I wouldn't take him until there. And you're like, what? But this is the year where you're getting that for like 5 or 6 of the guys where you're like, okay, why don't you like him? And it's been awesome this year because it's just so crazy and chaotic that you could ask 5 people about one name and get 5 different answers. And I've never seen anything like that. And I like Holland. I like Bazelis. I think it's just this year is going to be, there's going to be some big names that could drop and present really intriguing value. Or there's going to be a team that's like, we love him. We're just taking him. And it's like, all you need is one team to love you. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah. I'm not sure, Ken, if we're wrapping up the Raptor segment, but I just want to say, man, by the way, I love your mock draft for that second pick. We got a buddy in this case been talking to Keller Ware all season.
Ooh.
He's been begging for that. It's like, hey, man, I said, if we're on centers, I said, I already told these guys I would take him over. At the time, I would take him over Klingent. I would take him also over Filipowski. I said I would take him over both of them in my mind. Because I would, to your point, I want a guy I know that I can get 25 minutes out of him, and I don't have to worry about it, and he can just play. And he can play. Like, I don't have to worry about it.
He could. He had a good end of the year. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
He had a good end of the year.
No, yeah. Like Kling in this case, like don't get me wrong, I would take Kling too. If he had to drop for some reason, I take him. Filipowski,
There is a Duke bias on this podcast.
very
It's
enough.
not from me.
Okay.
I fully admit it. And the Tar Heel
I
fans-
wanted Grayson Allen on this team for the longest time. I'm just gonna say that, but hey,
he shall not pass.
yeah, exactly. But I do think that obviously the double hip surgery is a concern for Filipowski. For me, I'll say my things. First of all, we talk about fit. People talk about Scotty Barnes, and I'm gonna say he's got a long ways to go. And when the coach himself is saying, I don't know what he does particularly well, but he does a lot of things, and he made the comparison of if you do one thing versus two things versus three things, and then if you do four things, you're out of the league, kind of a thing. We're still trying to figure out what those 1 to 3, say 3 things that he does well. We know that he's really good in transition in terms of playmaking and the vision. Half court needs work. Obviously, needs to work on his advantage creation, needs to work on the handle. A lot of people think he's going to come out next year, have a go-to move. I'm like, I would like to see some more fundamental dribbles before we talk about go-to moves and all this kind of progression. So for that reason, I'm not drafting out a fit for anyone on this team. I think that Scotty is going to be a core piece moving forward. But when people say that they're scared of Ron Holland because he's a bad fit around Scotty, I'm like, you just take the best talent that you can. Obviously in this draft, there's, say everyone's around a talent floor within a certain range. So I'll give 2 names. Stephen Castle has piqued my interest when Coach pointed him out, and we watched a little bit of his stuff. And I was like, okay, interesting. I would also have to say, if you're going for the true upside swing, depending on combine and back. Yeah, I know you don't like this, but Toppage. I find it's very interesting. There's certain information that we don't have access to that a team would. But if I'm gonna go for the highest upside. I don't like small guards. Seen enough of that on this team. There's never going to be another Cal Lowry.
You're really not going to like this class if you don't like small cards.
We're going to get that in a second.
You're really not going to like this class.
We're going to get to that in a second.
So, yeah, I honestly, I don't see Castle as a wing. I think he can play wing in spots, but I think he's more of a guard. I know that there's concerns of the shooting. This team seems to think that they could teach anyone how to shoot. I don't know if that's necessarily going to be the case, but we will find out. And I do think, obviously, developmental, which kind of leads into our next point. I think developmental situations matter a lot for basically people, and it's kind of the X factor. It's kind of something that's not really talked about. There's obviously potential and ceiling and floor, but where you're drafted and the context that you're drafted in is very, very important. So, for that reason, I wanted to know your thoughts of, basically bringing in potentially 3 picks. I don't think we'll have 4, so that people don't have to worry about that, because I think if someone like a Bruce Brown is traded, it's probably going to be for, a 2025 or 2027 or whatever. But, yeah, like, what is your thoughts on, someone bringing in 3 guys into a situation? Because I always point out to people, you got to think of where the minutes are going to come from. Now, I will say this, and this kind of leads into a question that someone else wanted me to ask you, which is, I guess you're looking more into that 20 through 40 range. Is there that value so that, hey, even if you have to put someone in a more of a pipeline situation, is it still worth it in that instance?
I think when you're a young team, like getting multiple picks, I just bringing them in because it's shifting. I'm always one of those, like, you build through the draft, be patient. If you have ownership, that can be patient. If you have a GM that has job security, build through the draft, be smart, groom your own talent, be patient, allow them to keep working on their game. Now I know Scotty's getting to a point where it's like, okay, let's figure out how to build around Scotty. And now it's like, okay, what are we doing? So it's going to be interesting to see the direction they kind of start to go in. Do you get him more shooters? Do you try to just get best player available? I think this year, just having that potential early second round pick could be a fantastic value, because I think when you get past 25 in this draft and to maybe 40, there could be some names that were like, what are they doing on the board? Like, just with this class especially. So I think if you have the ability to be patient and bring in another player that, something Memphis did this year with Gigi Jackson, where it's like, you're going to learn how to be a pro in the G League. And then because of the situation where they had some injuries, they brought him up, got him some valuable playing time. Now he looks like a guy that's going to take a big second year step. So I would bring multiple guys in with this
Tyler,
class.
you just made Coach's day. I mean,
GG reference.
we talked about
if
GG.
you guys think I'm backing up GG for like I'm in love, like, no, we'll probably don't shoot the messenger. I'm just saying, they understood the value to get after it.
Quite the opposite. Coach is GG's biggest fan.
Oh, okay. Well then,
last year he said, hey, if he goes next year, he'd be a top 5 pick.
He would have. For sure.
It's definitely
probably
looking
going
to be
one,
the case.
to be honest. He's probably going number 1. So.
Yes. And honestly, while we did a presser in the middle of the draft, it would have been nice to get into the second round. There were guys, whether it was GG, I said I wouldn't have minded him as a second pick, whether it be Leonard Miller or a few others that dropped. It would have been nice to have that value, especially in the second round. So I totally agree with that. You don't think that there's a limit, though, to say 4 or 5 guys or whatever? Obviously, we don't have that. But is there a...
Yeah. You got to get to a point for sure of, okay, like some teams some years will go into the draft, they have 5 picks. I'm like, they're not taking 5 players. Unless you're stashing 2 and you're confident and the CBA is going to make this a whole different ballpark now,
right?
Because you have to be paying attention to the future and contracts. And I just think also with the direction, like the G League keeps getting more popular. I know you guys want to talk about that, but like teams are the smart teams are going to use that as a developmental source. So I would 3 is probably my max, and 3 would be like, okay, I have 2 firsts and a sweetener in the second round. And I think with that pick that they have projected right now, that the Detroit pick, if they could get that one, that's a very, very valuable pick. And if you have that pick and it's now we're having 2 days of the draft, that's a huge trade asset now, because overnight teams are like, hey, we want to come up and get this guy. So you could be like, right, maybe we could get something next year. You never know. So yeah, I just think the smart teams also understand what they are. And as you were asking before, like developmental fit, Toronto's in a good spot where they could keep bringing in pieces, let them groom together, get some playing time. Like, I think what they did with Grady Dick this year, like it took a while for him to get going, but then they finally got to a point like, hey, let's get him up here and let's get him playing and get him some reps. And, his confidence was building at the end of the year. I think that's so important for a rookie, getting their confidence into the offseason.
Absolutely, and I think especially so to give you a bit of context about Grady for the 905, because I'm just going to assume that you don't spend too much time watching the 905.
I try to catch up. Yeah, go for it.
So yeah, we basically lost half our team midway through, and had to basically rebuild our 905 squad midway through. At the very beginning, and shout out because I hope his brother becomes a Raptor. Dylan Harper's brother was our point guard in the 905.
Yes.
And it was like, we're trying to do that. He's not a point guard, and then of course, I think he was out with a rib injury or something. And then just basically like all our 2-ways, except for, well, actually all our 2-ways got cut eventually. Cause even, Marquise Noel, we basically didn't have a point guard for half of it. So it was tough. And this is why I bring it up, because for Grady, I agree with you. He needed some seasonings, so to speak.
Yes.
But at the same time, it's like, what are you marinating him with, right? And so to me, it's like if he had a better system, and this is why I like the fact that we might have a couple extra picks to kind of put into the pipeline. you are now coming to Summer League with a squad that, I mean, last year we talked about it. OKC basically brought their squad.
Yeah.
Like legitimately, Shay, you watch by the sidelines, everyone else, let's go. All right. And it was like, okay, fair enough. And we did not. I'll just leave it at that. Half of the people, they were talked about in a press conference, and it was like, the Red Wedding from Game of Thrones. They weren't there the next time. And so to me, I think that there needs to be an improvement for that. And this is the way to do it, is to have some pick equity, which is good. And especially 2025, potentially what happens this year, we may not have a pick next year. So you definitely need to hit on a couple more of those things, both short and long term. So we just talked about the G League. Makes sense to continue on with it. I would say with the news of the G League Ignite shutting down, so to speak, I don't know if that's a permanent thing or not, but at least temporarily, it's kind of interesting because, first of all, I thought that the G League guys did okay over the years, being drafted and, showing some sort of form of impact overall. But I'm kind of wondering, do you feel like it provided some sort of, like, maybe not the right developmental context? Also, it's interesting as what happens with the overtime elite now.
It's getting interesting. A lot of us at NoCeilings in the beginning of the year were trying to like speculate, like, I wonder if the OTE and the NBA are going to try to talk. I wonder if there's some, obviously the NBA's academy programs have gotten so popular. They've been fantastic, like with NBA Academy Africa and everything. Like they're getting really good. So I wonder if they're trying to figure out a way to maybe do something stateside. We'll wait and see. I think it was a great experiment. I know the last year, obviously this recent year, very ugly. And I know they didn't win a lot of games, but they were never going to win a lot of games because there's high schoolers playing against guys that are clawing to get on an NBA roster, that are physically advanced and hungrier, and it's tough because it's easy to point and be like, well, they didn't win a lot of games, blah, 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 blah. It's like, well, they had a lot of draft picks. They worked with guys for a full year. It's taken a while for some guys to really hit their stride. Like Jonathan Kuminga, I thought was fantastic this year. Jalen Green looked fantastic at the end of the year. I think it was a great experiment. It quickly got to the point where like, hey, guys probably need to go in another direction. Like maybe there's a better route here. Especially when like the OTE came in, they're trying to do this. There's too many. Like there needs to just be one like pipeline, like you keep saying, to get all the best out of all of these guys. But it's tough with the Ignite because you don't just need a team of 18-year-olds. You need some veterans that are willing to come in and, Pooj Eater was fantastic for Scoot Henderson. You need to find that every year for all these young guys. So they're not just an 18-year-old living by Las Vegas with no one really to look after, and they're getting a big sum of money. So it's tough. And I think, yeah, go ahead.
I'll just say real quick, during the green year, this is a little bit of Raptors lore too. Amir Johnson and Jarrett Jack were on that team.
Exactly. And guys like that, I just read an article by Mark Spears, and he was talking to a bunch of guys that have latched on, like Garrett Temple, Draymond Green, have just built very long careers in the NBA. And Draymond was like, Jarrett Jack was probably the most important person of my career because I had a vet that taught me everything that came with being an NBA player. So with these Ignite guys, like a lot of them don't have that. You're just kind of like, okay, well, I come work on my game, and then all of a sudden I get thrown into the fire of needing to be an NBA pro. And it takes guys a while to figure stuff out. So I think it was a good experiment. They got to probably iron some stuff out and figure out what you can do. And it's just also funny that this year, two of the big names are on the team that was the last year. And, Dink Pate is a big name that we're all kind of, what is he going to do now? Like, so I know there's been NBL speculation. I don't know. It's going to be really interesting, the future of some of those guys.
Gotcha.
Tyler, do you think now, when that announcement was made about the G League, that the NCAA is just going, we're going to get some more prospects now from the G League coming in and over the next few years, because let's just face it, doesn't have a Matt Tess in the NCAA tournament, doesn't have a Ron Holland, doesn't have a Tyler Smith, never had a Jalen Green, never had a Jonathan Kuminga or a Leonard Miller. Leonard Miller was number 1 or number 2 up here in Canada, basically, as a high school prospect. I mean, is the NCAA kind of excited about this? Because I feel like, quite frankly, the March Madness tournament could have used some of those guys this year.
I'm a big believer of all those guys should go to college. Like it just get the experience of being at college, being out on your own, kind of being in the belly of the beast. And I think, like you're saying, Coach, like the NIL has changed everything, and it's changed college basketball. All these coaches, they're like, I don't know how to compete with this, but it's now. Why would you go the Ignite if you could go get the same money in college and get the college experiment and also potentially be playing in the NCAA tournament? I just think guys should go do that. And I'm a big believer of when you're not ready for the NBA, it's okay to wait another year. Like just keep working on your game, like position yourself. So I think a lot of these young kids have been like, hey, Ignite wants to offer me this to play basketball year round. Like, why wouldn't I go do that? But it's like, don't just always look for the easy, money situation. I think the talent for some of these guys with college, I think the NCAA is probably really excited about it because they're going to start getting more guys like this. And we're seeing it for next year's class. Like some of the biggest names in a stacked class, all going to big schools in college. So going to be interesting.
Yeah, I also, Beyond and I were talking about this the other night in a space. We were talking about the importance of stakes in games and seeing guys. And to his point, especially in a G League Ignite type of situation, you're usually not going to be playing in the G League playoffs at high end, end of the year, whatever. And even if you are, it's not always going to be billed that way either. Everyone watches, if you're into basketball, that is, everyone watches the Final Four. Everyone watches March Madness. People are at least marginally somewhat aware of it.
When you talk about the receptionists of the CEOs involved in the pool, everyone's involved in the pool.
Yeah, right.
Even if they don't know anything about basketball.
Everyone at least has a son or daughter or whatever who is in one of those brackets.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit different in terms of stakes than the G League Ignite. And I think that that's one thing that I really like about the college game is that they have, there's a little bit of intensity that is, built into that college atmosphere. So,
well, that's what this is the other part we discussed from a scouting standpoint. No one can tell me that doesn't impact how guys see players as we move forward to this draft. Because we mentioned the example of Koulibaly, right? So take it for the French team. When they were in the playoffs, everyone was minding Wemby, understandable. Hey, who's this kid here playing with them, right? Because as they started progressing throughout their own season and the playoffs, like, oh, you saw as the stakes got higher, he started to play better and better. He started off when we started doing draft talk last year. He was like a high second round pick. Okay. And then we started going a little further. He was like a low in the 20s. And then we did another one just before the March Madness. He was like, okay, he might be somewhere in the teens, maybe late teens. By the time we were on the eve of the draft, there was serious talk. This guy's top 10 player, and he ended up being that. So, this idea that don't get me wrong, I was all for the Ignite at first because I think from a standpoint of getting the right coaching, I think there's a lot of failure from the college system. That college got to get over themselves a little bit, man. Seriously. It's like I think at the time these guys get here, you got almost reprogram them when you get in the NBA. It's like, yes. No, dude, we don't do this. So that's one part of it. But then the part you guys mentioned was the NIL has changed things which didn't exist at the time when this program started. And the other thing is the transfer portal, right? So now you can do it where you need to go if you want to put up numbers. I've had a debate with a buddy of mine. He's a Duke guy. And he had great concern, Coach, in this case here for us Tar Heels, about Love in this case. I said, look, I get it, but they said, look, Love in North Carolina is being featured the third guy sometimes as an option there. So he's going to Arizona. I say Arizona's no slouch of a program either. Don't skip my Arizona friend here. Arizona's a serious program in its own right. So for him to go there to be the number one, maybe number two featured dude out there, yeah, it's all about June for him in this case here. So that gives the option for that. As ironic, North Carolina took him out. I always find that kind of chuckling, but that's a whole other thing. But I got the reason why he did it. And my buddy's he said, I get it, but I still get it. It's you got to look at it from a standpoint of what's best for me as a player. in this case, to get to where I want to go. Because I think from his standpoint, yeah, those high leverage moments, Davis is getting the ball most likely, not Love. So yeah, I think these things are giving options to players that now is like the G League is not necessary in this case. What I'm saying, I think all those things combined plus the stakes, it just it makes it better. But the college game, yo, fellas, man, working out on the men's side, man, because the women's side they figured it out. Men's side, you all need to figure it out, man. Seriously. Seriously, man. It's like 1962 there watching some of these games.